Hello and welcome to Authentication with Django channels. In this video, we'll create a simple group chat application where users should register and log in to chat, okay? And we'll be using JSON web token for the authentication process. I'll share the basic steps to create the Django projects and integrate it with channels. Then I'll share the process to deploy it on Heroku as well. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I have prepared the code. I'll share you the code. Let's first check the demo. And yes, so here is our simple application. The user have to log in. User register and he can now log in. And let's take another account as well. Register here. Okay. Hey. Okay. Yes, we see we can chat here. Now let's look through the code. Okay, so I have 5 branches. So we'll start with the initial setup, then we'll basically progress through this, and you can I'll share the GitHub link as well, so you can find this project and you can modify as you need. Okay, so initially we just simply start the project called PopChat, then we start the chat and start the app called chat. Then once we start the chat, we add this chat application in our install application. Then we create a template. So in the template we simply put this static file. Then we set up our URLs. So if the request goes to the root domain, it will simply point to the index, and we define the view as well. And in the project URL as well, we simply point the request to our app, chat app. Okay, so if I refresh it, it should simply show the public chat, and we also set up our static directory and this color just to check that our application is actually getting it. We can access the static file as well. Okay, once the initial setup is done, we'll create a simple user model so user can log in. Okay, now then we'll create a simple model, a user model. So user model have the username, it will be unique, and they will have the name and they will have the password. Okay, so this is just the str, so we can see that when printed. And then for testing, as we should not save the password in the plain text. We have to hash that. So for testing, I create this create user method, and just simply call here to test. We create the password. We make use of the make password library from these auth assets. Once we create the password, we create the user and save the user, and we print the user. Okay, and we need to validate the password as well. So whenever the user log in again, they will provide the password. Since we don't save the plain text, we have to compare. So what we'll do is we'll first get the password from that user and compare with this. Okay, so this pass match should be true and this should be false. Okay, so I have tested that just to verify it should work. I've created this simple model and I tested that we can work with this check password and make password methods. Okay, now let's check our channel setup and register and login. Okay, now we'll set up Django channels. For that, first we need to install Django channels if that's not installed in our system. To install, we can simply run hit pip install u-Django channels. Okay, you can get this code as well. You can install your channels. Once the channel is installed, that need to be added in the settings.py as well. So we add the channels here, and then a channel can accept a consumer. So we'll create a consumer here, auth consumer. We are giving this consumer name as auth consumer because this consumer will handle the login and registration process. Okay, so we'll follow that registration on the channels as well. Okay, so if the event is received, we'll simply send the type of the event. Let's check the front end part as well. We have created some basic instruction. We'll get if the user is logged in, we'll show the information. If the user is not logged in, we'll show this, so a user can log in or register. You can see in this, user can log in or register. And in the JavaScript part, this file is to read the data from the local storage. So whenever we log in, we get the token back. We save that on the local storage. Let's just ignore for that for now, and connect auth socket. Okay, so this socket will simply connect to ws/auth. Whenever the connection is successful, we will print connected, and plus those. Okay, in the login button, we'll simply send the login event as type login, and for registration we'll do the same. Okay, for registration is the registration section. Okay, for registration we'll send that registration. Okay, we'll just simply create this consumer where the application will receive the data. If the event is register, you get the name, username, password. We make the password, hash the password, and save the user. If we find any error, any exception is thrown, we just simply assume that it is because of this unique username should be unique. So just attempt. There may be lots of error, but we are trying just for the sake of doing it. And if everything looks good, we will simply response as user register. Okay, now in the event, and if the event type is login, we just simply get the username and password. We'll just first find the user, and then if the user is not found, we'll simply return user not found, and then we'll compare the password. with the password provided by the user and the password saved in the database. If the password didn't match, we again return the error message. If everything is okay, we create a token. Okay, we are using this JWT thing here. We need to install that as well. So for that, we will simply install that pip install by JWT. Okay, so once we install that, we can use that package. So what JWT will do is it will take 3 parameters: the payload that need to be hashed, and a secret string. It should be a kind of long and secret string. Okay, but for the sake of this demo, I'll just use the secret text and the algorithm to hash this okay, to encode this payload. Okay, and once we create the token, we'll simply pass that token back to the client. Okay, as in the client application, once we receive the message, we'll, as you see here, we'll simply respond a message with login info type, and in the client side we check the received event. If the type is login info, we'll set is login to true, we'll set the token to token, and we'll set the user to the user that's being responded from here. Okay, we'll simply save all these information, and once we save that, we'll call this read local store method. As we have already stored this data on the local storage, this should be populated, and what this do is it will simply check if the user is logging. If it is logging, it will show the info screen, it will hide the login screen, and it will show okay, we haven't prepared the chat thing yet. Yeah, it will simply hide the registration thing and show the info screen, and it will populate the info field. Okay, okay, so we define the auth consumer. To access this auth consumer, we have to define our routing, and this routing is for the WebSocket. So the ws/auth request to auth will get to this consumer, and we have to define our ASCII as well. In this ASCII, we'll simply get that URL route from our routing, and we use the WebSocket protocol and auth middleware stack to get our routing here. Okay, and another thing is just to use these Django channels, we have to define the channels layer, the channel layer as well. Some solution is to use the Redis, but for this demo, we'll simply use in-memory cache channel layer, and we'll add this ASCII application here as well. Okay, so once that it's ready to go, okay, now we can log in, we can register and log in as well, and it will show the information. Okay, let's do that as well. And let's register, just say so this user register message, and let's log in, and it will show just this information. Okay, and now we have channel setup as well. Now let's implement the JWT authentication, and let's do the chatting. Okay, okay, now we'll introduce another consumer chat consumer. So here we'll check. Okay, I'll talk about that later. Okay, we'll introduce the chat consumer, and since we have to implement the JWT authentication, we need to have our own middleware. So as you remember, we have used that. Remember that. we have used that auth middleware stack from somewhere from channels authentication. We have used auth middleware stack. This middleware will get the session ID from the Django application and store that information in the scope layer. But as we are implementing our own user library, we need to, and the JSON token, we have to define our own custom middleware. So in this middleware, so we'll simply use our user auth middleware. We have defined that user auth middleware here, okay, not here but here, and user auth middleware in the user auth middleware. This is a simple initial code, and in this we'll set the token to false if we'll get the query string. So query string is the string that's been sent in the query, like this. Okay, so we'll simply look for something as token there, and we'll get whatever the string is saved here. Okay, and we have to update our script to pass that token as well. So we, in the read local store, we'll read the token from the token in the local store and connect the chat socket. In the connect chat socket method, we'll simply pass that token as query. Okay, so in the chat consumer, in the middleware, we'll get the scope from the query string, and in we'll just do some debugging. We'll just simply do some parsing and get the token, and we save the token in the token. If there is token, else it will be false. If there is token, we'll simply use the JWT decode method, and it will take 3 parameters as well. The token that need to be decoded, the secret, it should be the same secret that's used when encoding this token, and the algorithm, okay, the same algorithm that we use to encode this. Okay, so if the token is defined, we'll define the scope user and save the data that's been response from this token. Okay, this data will be the same data that's we have saved there. Okay, in the login part, as we have stored these 3 information: ID, username, and name. In that decode as well, we'll get that information. Okay, and let me clear the term of the middleware. Whatever the middleware do is, it will sit in the middle. Okay, whenever the request came from A, if there is a middleware, the request will goes to the middleware and it will pass further connection down the line. Okay, so once this user auth middleware is passed, the request will goes to the routing, and in the routing we have added our another pattern. Okay, the chat. So we simply check if the user is authenticated in this chat part, not in the auth part, because the public user can simply register and log in. In our chat consumer, if the user is not there, we'll simply accept that connection. We'll send the message that you are not being authorized. This will be saved to show the user is not authorized, and I simply send this message again as type no auth. And in the front end side, if the type received is no auth, I'll just call the logout function, so it will clear any data that's in the client side. Okay, the chat consumer. Okay, if and then we'll simply close the connection. Okay, so the client cannot send any further events, and if that's not the case, we'll save that user from the scope in the save that user, and then we join this user to the PubChat group. Okay, call that group. Okay, and we accept the connection. And so whenever we receive the message in the chat, we have just one event, just a message from the client. When we got the message, we simply get that message. We add our date, time to show in the client side, and in the pop chat group, we just forward that message to pop chat as the type as new message. As we forward this message, it will be called for every socket in that group. This event will be called, and they will send this message to their every client side. Okay, so all kind will get this message. Okay, even the sender will get the message. Okay, that's it. Now that's the way how we implement the chat. Okay, I think I make things clear. If I haven't, you can check the code as well. And here it is. Simply just this. Okay, so whenever we send the message, it will go back there, and we get the user as user, and the time is from the server as well. And let's check the part of the deployment. Okay, so we have to take care of something for the deployment. We need to care something more for the channels application. Okay, as we have to deploy on the Heroku, we'll add this proc file in the web DAPHEN, and we'll simply run our ASCII application here. And since we are using our SQL, our database as well, we have to, but Heroku doesn't provide this SQLite. We have to use the database PostgreSQL provided by them. So that database information will be saved in the data URL. So just to make it work on the offline as well, I'll simply set database URL to get from the environment variable. If it's false, we'll simply do nothing, and if we have some data from the environment, it is provided in this form of pattern, and we have to get the Postgres, the username, the password, the URL port, and DB name. There are these packages, Django Heroku, or Django Heroku, or there is another utility as well, VJ Django database URL, this package as well. We can use this package to parse this database URL, or we can do some manual work. I did some manual thing. There's lots of this and that to get this information, and we create the engine. We define our database. Okay, so if the URL is defined in the environment variable, this default will be replaced by the default from the line below. Okay, I think I'll okay as well. I think I have to. Okay, and another thing is, once we use the module, once we use this chat thing, and in this chat route, we have used access the model from our chat application. So what I have to do is I just have to move this bit top. Okay, back then it was in the line below, and this should be called before the app initialized, and that kind of thing I found looking through some files. And we have to set some static file as well, and it's done initially. With static file, we define where to solve the static file from and where to look for the static file. Okay, we'll simply save our files in the static and look for more files in the static file as well. And while doing this, I realized that I wasn't understanding anything about this, so I just make that. The process will look for the Django will look for the collect static event thing that will look for the static file in the static and static files, and it will solve from the /static. Okay, that's the part. I think that's it. Okay, that's how the application is done. If you have any confusion, let me know. I'll try to help you. Okay, have a good day. Thank you. Bye bye.